Hey there everyone, I am finally back creating new DIYs for my home and sharing them on my channel. It has been a long time coming and I was so excited to get finally back in and start making these for you all. However, not all the projects turned out to be what I expected and one of them had a catastrophic ending, but I went ahead and thought I'd share it with you all because not everything goes as planned, and that's okay. So, with that being said, welcome back. My name is Yami. I am your Latina next door. Welcome back to mi casa. So, a lot of these projects today are going to be from either thrifted items or things from my stash. You all know that I have had things in storage for over 2 years, and we finally have them here, and I have been unpacking them and finding lots of goodies. And I thought before I go out and buy new things, I'm going to be using what I have. So this first project is this cute little jewelry box that I found at a thrift store. It was only $3 at a local Goodwill. And I thought I would use it with some of my existing molds and some of my air dry clay that I had on hand, again, from storage. And I'm so excited to finally be using these things again. Now, as you can see here, I am creating some new molds out of my air dry clay, and these are maple leaves. I like the idea of the box having raised florals in the center of it, but I didn't think it was full enough, so I removed the original one and created my own. I used the larger maple leaf mold to cover up most of the space, and then I used singular leaves in order to fill in the empty spaces. And I also fixed one of the corners that was damaged initially. I just used some spackle and sanded it down. Now, I initially started with this muted chocolate color as my base. I was mixing some DIY paint in order to get this color because my main goal for this was to make it look like an antique wooden box. This is just, pressed cardboard. It's not real. But I wanted it to make it look like it was something vintage. And this is kind of how I started. First, I added the brown color, and then I added the wax, and then I began antiquing it. However, I did not stay with this color scheme because it actually ended up turning out the wrong tone. It was just all wrong for what I was going for. And I think this is just a result of me not DIYing like I used to and just not being in the zone, I guess. Just kind of like my wheels were still a little, squeaky, and I needed to, get back into things. But as you can see, it was just too blue and gray and just not what I was going for. So after I had painted it and distressed it, I went back in with a much lighter tone. And then when I had like this yellowy kind of tan look, I went over it with a antiquing glaze. And then I was finally able to get like this wood look that I was originally looking for. So I used the brush to apply the antiquing glaze, and then especially on the sides, I would use long strokes, and then I would come in with like a paper towel and I would wipe the excess off. And I would keep these long strokes so that it would look like wood grain. And here is finally how it turned out. So we're in the house, but not all of our walls are painted, and this is something that's going to happen within the next couple of months. However, I'm currently trying to make our house feel as homey as possible because we have all our furniture and things in it. So this mirror and this side credenza was in our entrance in our last house, and I decided to put it in the foyer here because it fits perfectly. However, it's just too much white on white on white, even though we will be painting these walls in the end. Now, it's hard to tell, but the two whites on the mirror and the credenza are a little different, and they don't kind of go with each other. So I decided to ask ChatGPT because I had the idea of maybe changing the color of the mirror, and it gave me a mock-up that I actually really liked. So I took the same antiquing glaze from the box, and I decided to go ahead and use it on this mirror, and I just began to paint right on top of the original finish. And what it does is it makes it look like it's wood, and I just would brush it along with a thin brush, and I'd come back in and remove any excess where I thought. Now the mirror is actually quite distressed in several areas, so the glaze is not going to go on evenly, which is okay, and it even makes it look more antique in my opinion. So that's what I did. Now, not everything went as smooth with this mirror, and I'll talk a little bit more about that because it did affect another one of my DIYs. But hey, this is how the mirror finally turned out, and I'll share that story in just a bit. For my next DIY, I am going to be transforming this vase, and this was going to be my very favorite DIY out of all of them. However, this is where the catastrophic events come into play. This vase I got at a local Goodwill for only $3.09. I love the two tones of the vase, and I started off by taping the bottom of it off and covering the top with a primer because it was quite slick and I wanted to make sure that the paint actually stuck onto it. After that, I began to add a nice sage green to the top portion that I had originally primed. And I took inspiration from these beautiful pottery pieces over at Pottery Barn. They were pretty expensive, and I thought, wow, this one already has these two tones. I can totally do something that would, be quite similar to this. And so I was really inspired. So I started off with a lighter sage, and then I came in with a darker color sage so that I can get the variation from the original vases. Then with a stiff stencil brush, I came in and began to distress the piece even more. And I just came in alternating the colors and distressing wherever I thought was necessary. If I had too much light sage on one side, I would just add a little bit more of the darker one, and that's just how I did the entire piece. Now for the bottom portion, it still had some of that orange coming through, so I went in with like a creamy white color and I just began to paint right on top of it. After that it was dry, I came in with Dark and Decrepit and I watered it down, and what this is like another water-based antiquing wax, only this one isn't as warm. It's a little bit more on the muted gray side, which I actually thought was perfect for this. After I was done with the bottom, I did the same thing to the top. And this time around though, I did lay it on a little thick and even let it drip in certain places to give it that antique, really old, just kind of messy clay look that it had in the original inspiration. Then finally, after everything was painted, I came in with Big Top, which is a water-based top coat that has a little bit of shimmer to it. It's not very glossy, but I did give it a couple of coats. And I also laid it on pretty thick as well. I wanted it to look really heavy and just like it just had this finish for a very long time. As you can see, it's turning out really beautiful, and I was so proud of this transformation. I thought it was just absolutely gorgeous. However, not everything goes as planned, and tragedy did strike. Now, remember that mirror that we redid earlier? Well, I had asked Nelson to put it up on the wall, and everything was fine for a while. However, somehow the wire that we put in the back of it in order to hang it got undone. And before I can take any nice footage of this vase, that mirror came crashing down on top of a few things that I had on the credenza, including that vase that I had just finished. And this was the scene that I came to. And as you can see, this is the finished vase along with a pretty big crack. And I absolutely love how it turned out, but it was pretty far gone. There was just a lot of pieces, a lot of small pieces that I just could not put back together, and it was completely cracked in two. So I had to get rid of it. It was beyond repair. But I did want to share it because obviously if you were interested in the technique and how I got it to look the way it looked, this would have been helpful. And also, things don't always turn out as perfect as we like, and this is one of them. So I thought I would just be honest and share what happened behind the scenes. So then after things like that, sometimes you have a DIY that just comes together effortlessly, just like this one right here. I had bought this frame for $2 at a local thrift store, and I also had this beautiful little print that my neighbor actually gave to me. She used to do paintings, and this is a small reproduction of one of her previous paintings that she used to sell. She gifted it to me when I first moved here, and I just thought this would be perfect to go into this little frame and to use as some art for the fall season. There are tons of free fall printables online. There's also ones you can buy off of Etsy. You can even use postcards for this. And that's all there pretty much is to it in order to have something framed perfect for fall. Also, don't be afraid to use things that you already have on hand. I actually have these long stems that have kind of seen better days. Some of the flowers had fallen off of it, and they were something that I unpacked in my boxes. And then I had gone to our local Dollar Tree, and unfortunately, it's actually closing. Because ours was a Family Dollar and Dollar Tree combined, and they've, I guess, are no longer working together, and so they're getting rid of all of their Dollar Tree stuff. So I only was able to find 2 of these little maple leaf bushes. But all I did was take off the flowers that were already on these stems and then just put the maple leaves on them instead. And that was all you have to do. Sometimes, if you have some good stems with some nice branches in your home already, just remove them and pop in some new leaves. And that's pretty much a very easy, inexpensive change that you can do to your florals in order to change them up for the fall season. Now, if you're not really into all of the pumpkins, or you're just not ready for it just yet, there is something else that you can do to add a little bit more moodiness to your home. And it's these beautiful, darker floral prints. Now, there's a ton of them available very inexpensively on Etsy, or I think you could probably even find a few free online. And they're absolutely gorgeous. Now, I'm trying to use what I have on hand. And if I would have printed these out, again, which would have been inexpensive, but I would have had to actually go to a store to get it done, and I would have ended up maybe paying about $20 minimum in order to get the size that I wanted. So I decided that since I had all my craft stash back, that I would see what I had in order to recreate a look very similar to this, but with things that I had. And I think I found just the thing. Now, I had this print. Actually, it's like a wooden painting that I bought at a local thrift store not that long ago. And I was just not into the wine motif here. So I decided to use this because it was actually a very nice size wooden art piece. And so all I did was I took some black paint and I began to paint the front of it in black because I really wanted that dark, moody background, just like those inspiration pieces from Etsy. Now, lo and behold, in my craft stash, in my boxes, I had some IOD transfers, and they're all these beautiful florals. So I decided to take them out and start cutting them and putting them together and piecing a beautiful bouquet in the center of this artwork and just kind of see where it went. Now, at first, it did take me a little while to find out what flowers I wanted where, and I kept rearranging and just kind of moving things around, trying to get an idea of how this arrangement was going to go, because once I started putting these down, that was it. And I wanted to make sure that it looked really good. So finally, when I decided of a kind of a direction that I wanted to go to, I started putting them down. And it's really simple. You just peel the back of these, and then you take the little spatula that they gave you with the kit, and you just start pressing it on your surface and removing the front plastic clear part. And this does take a little bit. You just have to be a little bit meticulous so that you do remove the entire transfer from the sheet, and you just keep rubbing and lifting until you get all of the plastic off. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, Yami, why would you go through this entire trouble of piecing this bouquet together in order to get this, piece of artwork done when you can just get it printed out at the store? And that is a totally valid point. However, again, this didn't really cost me anything. I had the thrifted artwork for a while now, and it only cost me $4, and I had all of these flowers on hand. And so I just thought, why not go ahead and use them? And also, this stuff is sometimes part of the fun, is actually putting these things together and using your own creativity in order to make something absolutely unique for your home. So the process is actually quite therapeutic when you actually sit down and just use your creativity to put something together that's completely unique and solely yours. So this process was actually a whole bunch of fun, even though at first I was a little bit nervous of how it would turn out in the end. Then after I was done placing all of my florals, I took some clear wax and I added it to the entire thing in order to protect it. Lastly, once that was cured, I came in with some rub and buff and I added it to the exterior border on all four sides so that I can build kind of like a faux frame around the entire art piece. All right, you guys know I love a good wreath and I love having them for all sorts of seasons. Now online, they are super expensive, well over $100 a piece for really beautiful ones. And I was just recently at Hobby Lobby and I came across this simple leaf wreath and the regular price for just this was $38. Now they do go on sale, however, that's just not enough decoration for a wreath. So I thought again, I would make my own. Now I thought about using the grapevine wreaths, but those have gone up in price. And the next best thing was this hay wreath. And the reason the actual wreath form is very important to me as far as price is because now I have a double door for a front door. And this straw wreath is only $4.49 versus a grapevine wreath, which right now is starting at $9 or $10 just for the actual grapevine wreath alone. And now I have to double that by 2 because I have 2 front doors. So I decided to try this one out and see how it goes. Now I also picked up some of these fall picks at Hobby Lobby as well, and they were 40% off at the time when I picked them up. I tried to buy as few as possible because I'm really trying to be conservative here as far as how much I spend. My goal was to make 2 wreaths for less than the actual price of that original wreath at Hobby Lobby, and I think I actually did it. I got these stems as well as anything that I can pick up and find from my stash that I have here at the house. I was opening up boxes trying to see what I can find, and I did find some stuff that was left over from previous projects, so I used that as well. Now, what I like to do in order to get a beautifully designed and even throughout wreath is I like to use one item of foliage as I go. I don't like mixing and matching them whenever I adhere them. So first off, I'll start with my base florals, and here I'm using a maple leaf. And so what I like to do is I like to cut them off of the picks, and I like to make them, smaller pieces so I can spread them out a little bit more evenly. And I'll do like a dry run at first, and I'll lay them across the wreath just so I can see the placement that I need in order to give it the fullest effect. And then I go back and then I use a glue gun, and then I start adhering it throughout the perimeter. And I do this for each type of foliage. So I'll start with one. After I'm done exhausting that one on the wreath, then I go to my next one, and so on and so forth. Now, the big difference from using a hay wreath versus a grapevine wreath is that it's actually a little bit harder to stick these little stems inside of it. It's just wound a little bit tighter, but it can be done. Another good thing about using something like this with natural fibers like hay or like a grapevine wreath is that if you do end up seeing some of the wreath form through the foliage, it still looks like it's part of the actual wreath and it's intentional. So that's something to keep in mind instead of using something like a foam wreath. Now, because I did not buy that many stems and these wreaths were kind of large, I did come in with some of my extra pieces, like these little pumpkins, in order to fill in gaps in certain areas so that I didn't have any of the wreath actually showing through. I did create 2 of these wreaths because, again, I do have a double door, but I don't have a way to attach both of them just yet. So here you are. This is what it looks like on my back door that goes to my back porch patio. Here's one of them hung up so that you can see how they turned out. Well, that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to give this video a thumbs up and let me know which one of these projects was your favorite. My return to DIYing was a little rocky, yes, but I think we made some pretty good progress and we have some really pretty things that we can use for this fall season. I hope you're doing well and I'll see you back here for another video very soon. Until then, adios.